all suck.
What's your name?
Joe. Thanks for asking. Generally, people don't even want to acknowledge my existence. I appreciate that.
I acknowledge it.
Well, I'm a friendly stranger in a black sedan. I'm inside my car. I got pictures of candy. I'm a lovable man, and I can take it to a star. I'm a beautiful baby. I'll take it back where you want to go. I'm a beautiful woman. I can't show you know that I love you, need you, want to, got to, your child. Thank God in heaven, you know I love you. Thank you very much, baby.
Good evening. Well, it's James Kalm, your half-assed reporter, the guy on the bike. We're going to drop in here at the Gladstone Gallery. And we're going to take in a brief viewing of an exhibition of works by Keith Haring. Well, I'll read a little bit from the press release. Haring first rose to prominence in New York for his spontaneous graffiti-inspired drawings that began appearing through the city subway stations during the early 1980s. The artist's motif for the subway drawings was not self-promotion or property defacement, but rather his passion for democratic accessibility to his work outside of conventional art space. Okay, well, I remember seeing his work in the subways, and I actually did a series of work myself. If you're interested, there's a video that was recently posted on YouTube. I think you need to search for something like The Birth of Street Art in New York, something like that, at the Frost Gallery. And I was on a panel with a couple of members of a street art group called Avant, and did some things. One of my projects was going around and erasing Keith Haring drawings. This is Untitled, 1988, acrylic enamel photograph and paper collage on canvas, 120 by 120 inches. Well, they talk about the fact that this was probably the last body of work that Keith completed before he passed away. I think he died in 1988 or 89, maybe. It's titled Prophets of Rage, 1988, acrylic on canvas tarp, 120 by 180 inches. Well, I kind of was peripherally connected with Keith. I know that I was in a show that he curated at Danceteria. And, well, Keith was known as quite a generous and giving artist. And of course, there was a certain amount of, I guess, competition that a lot of other young artists felt. I think because of his subway drawings and the fact that he got arrested a couple times for that and got a lot of publicity. And it tweaked some of the other people, and they felt like they were in competition with him. This is titled Malcolm X, 1988, acrylic and enamel paint and collage on canvas. Now, this is interesting, and yeah, I wonder if Keith did those because he was well known for his his Radiant Baby paintings, but here we've got some kind of cartoon work where he's got much more articulate line. There he's actually rendering these kind of trophy heads. Okay, so I guess this all deals with the photographs of the assassination of Malcolm X. His life oozing out through a half dozen or more gunshot wounds in his chest. Malcolm X, once the shrillest voice for black supremacy, lay dying on the stage of Manhattan's auditorium. Wow. Well, I think by this time, and maybe that's because he was dying of AIDS, he was not dealing just with this happy pictures of the kind of the faceless babies dancing, or the radiant dogs. And well, they're saying that some of these have never been exhibited before, and I haven't seen these works. I was talking to an artist that knew Keith, and he was talking about the time that Keith spent in France. I guess this was 84, 85, and how Keith was a big fan of Combas. And this particular artist, and I agreed with him, this particular artist said that at that point Keith kind of changed his style. You know, he's always had the fat line and the couple of characters, and he got into more of a Neo-Expressionism kind of cartoon figuration. I'm not giving you the names of these, but most of these are untitled. And they're gouache, ink, and paper collage on paper. Just to comment on this, looks like these are on linen paper. And I think that's also a kind of a sign that Keith was going for something that would be a little more archival and kind of put these works on paper into a more material realm. Actually, this is simple, but I like his color thing that he's got going here. And this is a whole period of time. The East Village scene in the 1980s has become a kind of a trend of people reviving it. We saw the David Vornarovich show at the Whitney a couple months ago. Oh, this is fun. Okay, so got a little angel. Something's also kind of making me think of Picabia from the late 20s, early 30s. Actually, I like the drawing here as kind of space-age cubist figure. Keith died young. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if he would have lived another 30 years. It's titled Portrait of Sade. And he's got a cover of Interview magazine there. Untitled 1989, Acrylic and Enamel on Canvas with Collage. Well, this is pretty simple, but I still like his palette. As I said, I bumped into Keith every now and then and was very aware of his subway works. Again, this makes me think of Picabia. And this section here, these little interlocking forms, I've actually been by fabric shops and they've got a whole bunch of designers now that are making kind of versions of this. And gosh, Keith had the pop shop and that kept going for another maybe 30 years after he passed away. And I was in Paris probably 4 or 5 years ago in the middle of a hot summer. There weren't any yellow vests, but we were running around and we happened to stop in at the Museum of the City of Paris and well, they were having a Keith Haring retrospective there. And well, for a moment I felt kind of sad because I guess when you die young like that, it doesn't really seem like you die, just kind of like you go away. And it's only after an institution kind of takes you and puts you in some kind of vacuum-controlled vitrine that you realize someone has really passed away and gone into the annals of history. And well, it made me feel a little older. James Kalm reporting on Keith Haring here at the Gladstone Gallery.
Well, if you wanna be a movie star, I might take it to Hollywood. If you wanna stay just the way you are, you know I really think you should.
We're on 26th Street, and I'm sad to say that we're going to be dropping in here at Cheim Read for probably the last time. We're going to be closing the gallery. A stroll through of Louise Bourgeois, show titled Spiral. Well, I guess this is a fitting send-off exhibition. And, well, gosh, I've seen a lot of great shows here. I think that people are going to miss Cheim Read and their program and the people and artists and attitude that they have brought to their, I guess it's over 20 some odd years of exhibitions they've done here. Okay, yeah, now I'm starting to pick up on the theme of the title of the show, Spiral. Okay, we'll go back and look at some of these pieces in a little more depth. Okay, also a note to our sculptor fans. I get criticized for not covering enough sculpture, but well, I'm glad to get in here. So you can go back in the files. I've got a great tour of Louise Bourgeois at the Guggenheim. This is titled Nature Study 1, 1985, bronze, dark and polished patina. It's titled Liar. This is latex. Cheim Read is pleased to present Louise Bourgeois' Spiral, the gallery's 9th solo exhibition devoted to the artist's work. Labyrinthian Tower, 1962 bronze. And yeah, strangely, this kind of relates to a show that's just around the corner that makes me think of a Brancusi. Back to the press relief. The show will explore the range of Bourgeois spiral motifs as expressed in sculpture, painting, and drawings. From the early 1950s through 2010, the year of her death. Okay. Actually, I think Louise was a great draftsperson. This is Untitled. Ink and charcoal on paper. This is 1947. Now, I believe that Louise was married to an art critic. I forget his first name, but I believe his last name was Goldwater. And I think she'd been living in New York maybe since before World War II. It's titled Rondeau for L, 1963. This is plaster. Resign 8. Resin over hemp. Okay, if you saw that laying on the sidewalk, you probably wouldn't want to reach down and pick that up. Untitled. Ink on graph paper, 11 by 8. It's 1951. Okay. Kind of makes me think of one of Raymond Pettibone's surfer drawings. This is Liar, 1962. Bronze painted white. (22 by 22 inches). Oh, I thought this was a marvelous piece. This is titled Sutures. Steel, thread, rubber, needle, and enamel pin. Well, I guess part of the myth or the biography of Louise Bourgeois is the fact that she came from a family that had a long tradition of working in the tapestry, I guess repairing the tapestry industry, and so I guess she would spend a lot of time in the workshops and observed the techniques and probably got a feel for the materials and the process. And then there's a whole other volume to the story about her relationship with her father. And there's also another story that at some point she met Marcel Duchamp here in New York and was very taken with him. And at that point, Duchamp was kind of a cult figure among a certain group of the avant-garde intelligentsia. This is nature study. White marble. And one of the things that I always admired about Louise is that a lot of contemporary artists, we won't go into naming names, but a lot of well-known and commercially successful artists actually have huge factories of workers. I mean, and sometimes they're even farming out the work to places like China or Central America, and having just mass quantities of their work made there. But Louise was always known as someone that did this work herself, so, and she wasn't a youngster. Okay, this is 1986. So I can imagine her there chiseling away at this. I mean, that could be part of the myth, but I like to think of her chiseling away at that herself. Okay, now that probably is the most emblematic image of the show and the title. This is Untitled, circa 1970. Paint on board. Yeah, so this is a very brusque handling, and yeah, they don't tell you whether that's oil or acrylic or enamel or what, but yeah. I think Louise could paint pretty well when she wanted to, and also I like the kind of the patina of age. Some of the other spiral drawings. This is chalk on color paper. I think that's about 22 by 34. Well, this is nice. We've got a group of what they're calling loose sheets of writing, 1986. Ink on blue paper, 11 by 8.5 inches. Well, okay, so this is kind of nice. This makes me think of the poems that Apollinaire was doing that would kind of shape the letters to fit the image. Well, he's a San Sebastian and San Sebastian de Regados. I like the notations. I guess you could pause the videos and zoom in and read the various parts of that. Okay, that kind of looks like a little kitty there underneath something. The conqueror of from home. Okay. Okay, this one is dated March 25th, 86, 1 p.m. Okay, I can kind of smell the opportunity to bind these out, reproduce these and bind them into a nice little catalog of her letters. Okay. I think they're having their Christmas party here, the last one. It's also dated March 25th, 86, 3 p.m. Oh gosh, with these spiral text, it would be hard to see which side is the top and which side is the bottom. Okay. This is Untitled 2004, aluminum. And somehow Louise is able to kind of combine almost the grotesque earthiness of what could be a pile of intestines or something like that. But then, yeah, she puts it together in a nice, balanced, kind of wonderful form and has it cast and polished. And again, this kind of mirrored surface, I think, recalls Brancusi. And one of the other things is that I think Louise was one of the first sculptors that started suspending her work from cables from the ceiling, and it's become kind of a overused trope these days, but I think when Louise started doing it, it was pretty interesting. They're just calling this a group of spirals, suite of 12 oil-based woodcuts on Japanese handmade paper. Each sheet is 14 by 16 inches. And, well, I think it's wonderful when you can take a simple subject, kind of a universal subject like a spiral, and play around with it and kind of find so many kinds of variations on a theme. It's Untitled, 2005 fabric, 24 by 31 inches. Yes, and Louise is back to her fabric and the sewing. But this is great, the way she's taken just a striped fabric and the way that she cuts it up and sews it back together again, creates this great composition. You know, it's just as interesting where she doesn't cut That's where she does cut. And I also like the way that she's taken so much time to make sure that the stripes line up. Okay, this is our last piece we're going to look at. Spiral, 2009 gouache on paper, suite of 4. Which one is 18 by 23.5 inches. Yeah, this is nice. Some sections are sprayed or covered and encouraged to bleed. Other places are left dry, so just the straight strokes remain. You can like this, recommend it to your friends and share, and subscribe. And you can leave your thoughts, ideas, criticisms, suggestions, and reviews below. But as always, we like to say, thank you, Kate.
This song has got some pretty creepy lyrics.
I like them.
Thank you so much.
Right on straight up, Ferry, transfer over to the 1.